What's going on, everybody? Welcome into episode 6 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast on this Friday, October 4th, 2024. I'm your host, Zach Malamud. Before we get into anything today, please subscribe below. Follow all of my social accounts. There is only one place to start today. 2 words, Pete Alonso, who hit a massive 3-run home run, a go-ahead homer in the top of the ninth with the season on the line for the New York Mets to take a 3-2 lead in the ninth inning. Mets added one more right after that with Starling Marte's RBI single, but going to take everybody back to the start of this game. It was Quintana on one side, Myers on another for the Brewers, and Quintana had a really strong game in this one, 6 strong innings to really give the Mets a lot of good stuff and not have to go into their bullpen too early, and they needed every single pitch that Quintana had. 6 innings, 4 hits allowed, no earned runs, 5 Ks in the end. But then they get into the bullpen, both teams. McGill comes in for the Brewers, kind of locks things down, as well as Mears. And then Jose Butto comes in for the New York Mets. And just when that happened, he gets only 1 out in the 7th inning. But the other 2 batters right there were Jake Bauers and Sal Frelick. They hit 2 home runs, back-to-back solo shots, both to right field, both 3 feet apart from each other. 405 was Bauers, 408 was Frelick, and it gave the Brewers a 2-0 lead. And just when that happened, a lot of doubt creeped in to Mets fans' minds, although they always know with this team this year and just how it should be, that the Mets will find a way to come back and win it. And they head into the ninth as Lindor gets on base with a walk. Vientos strikes out, but then I think one of the biggest hits of the game was Brandon Nimmo to not only not get out, leaving 2 outs for Pete Alonso, who's next, but also getting on base, moving Lindor, giving the Mets confidence with 1 out, 1st and 3rd, and then Alonso comes up, and it was just his time. Pete Alonso, who's gotten a lot of stick in the last month or so, and basically the entire season, only batting .222 in the postseason. But what a time to come up with a huge home run. Like I said, top of the ninth, a 3-run shot, and he knew it right off the bat. But I give a lot of credit to the guys in front of him, Francisco Lindor, Brandon Nimmo, getting on base. Not easy against Devin Williams, a lockdown closer for the Milwaukee Brewers, who has been rock solid throughout the season. And I feel like that's just the story of the Milwaukee Brewers when it comes to all of their guys really have been locked down for most of the season and very, very solid. And that's given them a great spot and a great seed in the playoffs each and every year. It just comes postseason time. And a team like the Mets, who's gritty and just continues to fight to find a victory, ends up coming out on top versus this Brewers team. But Williams, only 2 1/3 and 3 hits allowed, 4 earned runs he gave up, just 1 strikeout. I mean, when you look at it for the Mets, all the credit has to go to everything that happened earlier in the game. I feel like Quintana giving those 6 innings, the players just sticking with it, not losing confidence, although it was only 2 hits allowed for the first 8 innings of the game from the Brewers pitching. They were really strong throughout, and the Mets just had to chip away at it. Finally got those 3 hits in the top of the ninth. And when you look at it in the end, the story is Pete Alonso. Very well deserved for, like I said, a guy who was not on the top of Mets fans' minds in a good way. I mean, he was getting a lot of stick from the fans all season long. The questions of re-signing him at the end of the season, I think Met fans know the answer and want the answer right now. They probably have to give him his money in the end, because this guy stepped up in the biggest moment and got the job done for the Mets to move them on to the next round, to the NLDS, where they're going to take on the Philadelphia Phillies, a team that they know very, very well. So the Mets win it 4-2 in Milwaukee. What an absolute huge win for the Mets. They win the series 2-1 in the end. Pete Alonso is the hero. A 4-2 Mets win in Milwaukee to knock off the Milwaukee Brewers, and the Mets move on to the NLDS. Let's move to that series now, which starts on Saturday. A 4:08 start in game one of the NLDS. It's going to be the Mets taking on their division rival, the Philadelphia Phillies. This one at the bank in Philadelphia. Mets still undecided who's going to pitch in game one. I believe it's going to be McGill at the end of the day, and he gave them enough in that game against the Atlanta Braves. Of course, the Mets coming back and winning that one in the end and clinching that playoff spot in the first game of that doubleheader on Monday. McGill pitched that game. I think he's going to get this one. Although Peterson only had 7 pitches in this last one, he ended up closing the game out for the Mets. You look at it for the Phillies on the other side, it's Zach Wheeler. I think when you look at the matchup between McGill and Wheeler, obviously there is the advantage going to Philadelphia. But the Mets can find a way to get to Zach Wheeler. I think although he's had a fantastic season and should definitely get his flowers for that, it's playoff time now, and you never know with this Mets team. I would look at the Phillies being obviously favorites in this one, of course, based on the pitching matchup number one. But clearly, I think when the Mets get into a game like that, it almost feels like after a game like that, you almost what is left to give. Of course, they have to keep going, but I think it's just going to be a bit of a hangover for the New York Mets heading into game one. The Phillies are very well rested. Obviously, the number 2 seed in the NL in these playoffs. But I look at the Phillies as well as their lineup, plus the pitcher on the mound in Zach Wheeler, and I think the Phillies should take care of game one. But if you're the Mets, you're going to the series, I think just taking one from Philly is a big, big sticking point. You head back then to New York with a 1-1 series tie. And if you win all 3 games in New York, which I won't put it past New York, of course, how solid they've been at home recently and definitely racking up those big wins. I think if you're the Mets, you hope for just one win in Philadelphia and try and close it out at home. If not, then you try and win one more in Philly if you go on the road for games 6 and 7. But I look at this matchup. Obviously, the Phillies are favored in the end to win it, but you cannot count out these New York Mets. They, time and time again, back against the wall. It's just the Mets type of year. They have that magical thing in their lineup and pitching wise that this team really could get to the next line and the next level, and they can continue to roll and can get to an NLCS. They just have the Philadelphia Phillies in their way. So it's going to be Mets taking on the Phillies. 4:08 start on Saturday in game one of the NLDS. Should be a great one. Tune into that one. But the Mets come off the big win in Milwaukee, and they go to Philadelphia for game one starting on Saturday. We shift things to the Bronx as the New York Yankees have figured out their opponent for the ALDS. And game one starting on Saturday, 6:38 p.m. Eastern Time. It'll be the Yankees hosting the Kansas City Royals, who come in off of a 2-0 series sweep in the wild card round against the Yankees' division rival, the Baltimore Orioles. So the Royals come in feeling really good, and the Yankees obviously have that long week off and have a lot of well-rested players. It's going to be the pitching matchup. Michael Wacha taking on Garrett Cole, and Wacha comes into this one feeling really good, as well as Garrett Cole on the other end, who's had back-to-back starts where he's gone really deep and helped the Yankees grab big wins, one in Oakland and the other one against Baltimore in their last series of the regular season, their last meeting of the regular season, those two teams. When you look at this overall, Wacha's been really, really strong against specific Yankees, specifically Aaron Judge. So may not be the easiest one for Aaron Judge and the Yankees, but I think if you are the Yankees, you rely on Garrett Cole in this one. You got your ace on the mound. When you look at this matchup overall, this series, you have to say, when you look at Kansas City's pitching, they are rock solid. All three guys in that starting rotation. You got Cole Ragans, who pitched very, very well against Baltimore in game one of the wild card. Then you have Seth Lugo, who can go very deep. Didn't go as deep as he may have wanted to in the wild card round in game two against the Orioles, but they still found a way to grab a win there. And now you got Michael Wacha, who's been rock solid and very good against very good against the Yankees in the end. I think, like I said, Aaron Judge has struggled. Juan Soto's a guy who's been solid, but hasn't faced Wacha enough that you could really tell who has the advantage there in that duel. But I look at Wacha and say, all right, well, it's not going to be easy for the Yankees. Let's go to the Yankees lineup, though, because in the end, when it comes down to the postseason, and you see it with a lot of these other teams, there's not many hits, but the hits are very impactful. And I think when you look at a Yankees team that they rely on home runs a lot more than they rely on small ball and base hits, this is a series where that has to come out, the impactful home runs and the impactful plays, because you're not going to get enough opportunities. Yankees, a team that for the last some odd years or so has continued to struggle with runners in scoring position. They need to change that immediately in this series if they want to get past this tough, gritty Kansas City Royals team who continue to just rack up hits and like to play small ball. A lot of fast guys on the bases, a lot of stolen bases, I feel like should be expected from the Yankees, and that's something to watch out if you're the Yankee catchers in Austin Wells and Jose Trevino heading into this series. When you look at the Yankees lineup, though, you feel confident that they can get to a pitcher like Wacha and try and hit the long ball. However, they need to do it way more than they even expect to do. I think when you look at this postseason, like I said, you have to continue to rack up hits. You have to make the most of those opportunities that you have runners on base. So I think that's a big thing for the Yankees heading into this series, but they have Garrett Cole on the mound. You probably don't expect a lot of hits and runs to be allowed by Garrett Cole, especially in the Bronx in front of the home crowd. Game one, it's a Saturday night in New York. I think when you look at the overall series, the Yankees have the advantage. We talked about that on Wednesday when Josh Mallard was on. Garrett Cole, Michael Wacha, and the Yankees overall, I think when you look at the lineup, they have an advantage over almost every team in the American League right now. The problem is the bottom of their lineup and getting hits from the bottom of their lineup, which every other team left in the postseason, Cleveland, or in the American League left in the postseason, Cleveland, Kansas City, and Detroit all get hits from the bottom of their lineup. So definitely need some big hits from guys like Alex Verdugo if he's in the lineup, other guys like Anthony Volpe there. I mean, they need to step up big time for the Yankees to get past Kansas City. But it's going to be game one. Wacha taking on Cole. This one takes place Saturday night, 6:30, 8 p.m. is the start Eastern time. It's the Yankees taking on the Royals. Game one, ALDS. Cole and Wacha on the mound in the Bronx. Baseball's been the story in the last week or so, but we do have to talk about football because that's going on this weekend. Two games, both New York teams in action on Sunday. We'll start off with the New York Jets as they travel to London to take on the 4-0 Minnesota Vikings. Jets coming in at 2-2 after last week's loss to Denver on their home field. And coming into this one, Minnesota is 2.5-point favorites. Total sitting at 40.5 for this one. And when you look at it for the Jets, it just comes down to, I talked about it on Wednesday, they have to get Aaron Rodgers to find his receivers in this one. They have a really solid matchup against the Minnesota Vikings secondary, which is not on the top level when it comes to secondaries in the NFL. Although their defense has looked really good so far this year, I think more credit needs to go to guys on the defensive line as well as the linebackers who have really shut down the run game. So it may be a long day for a guy like Breece Hall. However, the Jets need to rely on Aaron Rodgers to get the ball to his top weapons, Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, as well as Allen Lazard, even Ty Conklin, get the tight end involved as well. If they do that, I think the Jets are in good shape to take it to this Minnesota Vikings team. And obviously on the other side, you got Sam Darnold, former second overall pick for the New York Jets. And when you look at overall or former third overall pick, excuse me, for the New York Jets, Zach Wilson was a former second overall pick for New York. But when you look overall at Minnesota's offense, Sam Darnold has been very, very good. I don't know if he's faced a defense quite like the New York Jets. And you may say, oh, well, he faced San Fran in the end. I would take the Jets. I think the Jets are the top defense in the NFL right now, and even with a couple of injuries, they still look really, really strong. And all of the games have been under 20 points they've allowed this defense so far this year in the first 4 weeks. So when you look at it in the end, I do think that Sam Darnold hasn't faced a defense like the Jets, and it could be a little bit difficult on a day like this where he's not at home. That's another difference. He played San Fran as well as Houston on his home field at US Bank. This one's all the way across the pond in London. So when you look at that overall neutral site, no real fan advantage there. I think the Jets can get to Sam Darnold and try and trick this offense that has worked very well so far this year. Aaron Jones has been very, very strong, 64 carries on the year, 321 yards in 4 games this season. Justin Jefferson has been rock solid at wide receiver as every year goes on. 20 receptions so far this year, 358 and 4 touchdowns. I look at the Jets overall, though, and the defense being able to get to Darnold would be huge for this game. Of course, CJ Mosley is questionable, and the Jets already have a lot of guys out in Jermaine Johnson, as well as Morgan Moses is also questionable, probably not going to be back for this one, but that's on the offensive line. A guy like CJ Mosley, of course, you would love him in the lineup for the Jets. He's questionable right now. Still a question if he's going to play or not this week. But this Jets defense can get to Sam Darnold, and I think they could cause trouble for a Vikings team that is very, very good and will be a playoff team, in my opinion, by the end of the year, the end of the regular season. However, it happens for a team to drop a game, and I think this is the week for the Jets to step up and take down the Vikings away from home in a neutral site. I think I'd give the advantage to the New York Jets from there. So should be an interesting one. 9:30 start Eastern time in London. Make sure you set the alarm, wake up early. The Jets 2-2, the Vikings 4-0. Should be a good one. The first of many games in London this season in the NFL. We'll take things back across the Atlantic as the New York Giants will not be at MetLife Stadium, but they'll be on the road in the United States taking on the Seattle Seahawks. This one taking place 4:25 on Sunday. Giants coming into this one at 1-3. Seahawks are 3-1. Both teams coming off a loss. Giants coming off the Thursday night football loss to the Dallas Cowboys. Seahawks coming off a Monday night football loss to the Detroit Lions on the road. And when you look at Seattle, 3-1, they look really strong, and they're coming in as 6-point favorites in this one. Total sitting at 43.5. So when you look at it overall, the big question for the Giants is the health of Malik Nabers. Looks like a long shot to play for the Giants this week. And when you look at that, it really tells you the story where the Giants going on the road in Seattle, although they lost last week, feeling very, very good about their football team right now. It could be a long day for the New York Giants, especially if they don't have Nabers in the lineup. Yes, there are other guys. I mentioned a couple of days ago, guys like Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson had a great week last week, although the Giants didn't end up winning the game in the end. Still looked very, very solid as a possession type wide receiver for Daniel Jones and a solid option to go to behind Malik Neighbors. So I think it could be a big week for a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson as well as Darius Slayton. But I also look at Daniel Jones to just kind of keep this game close. I know that in the end, it's probably not expected that the Giants will win in Seattle, but if you keep it close, it continues to grow the confidence of this team. And yes, there'll be more losses in the loss column. However, if Daniel Jones is looking solid, this team will look a lot better and they will feel more confident going into future weeks. I think without Neighbors, it's way too tough to go into a place like Seattle. And Seattle, like I said, at 3-1, feeling really good at the top of their division in the NFC West. And that's a loaded division. They want to keep racking up wins. Seattle, of course, a very, very solid team. I think when you look at the matchup, though, without Neighbors, it's very, very tough to see the Giants coming out with a victory here. And rightfully so, they are 6-point underdogs going into Seattle. But definitely keep an eye on the news coming out for Malik Neighbors because the concussion makes him a long shot right now, according to Jordan Renan. And then on the other side, Seahawks looking very healthy. Their defense, there is some weak spots in their secondary, and maybe the Giants could take advantage of that with Robinson and Slayton. However, it should be a tough one for the Giants in the end to go to Seattle and try and come out with a win. I'm going to say that the Seahawks end up winning. The Giants could keep it close, though. I think Daniel Jones his confidence has grown in this offense week after week, and they've gotten more opportunities to really make him thrive and allow him to thrive in this offense in the last couple of weeks. So when you look at it in the end, Seahawks coming in as 6-point favorites. Tune into it on Sunday, 4:25 start Eastern time. It's the Seahawks at 3-1, the Giants at 1-3. This one taking place in Seattle. To finish things off today, it's another edition of a Sunday football preview. Each week, I'll pick 2 to 3 of the top games across the NFL slate and share my thoughts on them. I have 2 this week. I'm going to start off in the 1 o'clock window where the 3-1 Buffalo Bills take on the 3-1 Houston Texans, 2 teams that may meet towards the end of the season, may meet in the playoffs later in the season, as they're both definitely contenders in the AFC as we speak. And coming into this one, interesting, Buffalo on the road comes in as 1-point favorites. It's basically almost down to a pick 'em right now between the Bills and the Texans, but Bills slightly favored coming in, total sitting at 47.5, so a lot of points expected here. But Buffalo sitting atop the AFC East and Houston sitting atop the AFC South. Buffalo coming off the big loss on Sunday Night Football last week where they got trounced by the Baltimore Ravens. Houston hung on for a big division win against Jacksonville at home, and Houston at home in this one, they will probably be without Joe Mixon for another week. They're also looking at their offensive linemen, who a lot of them are questionable coming into this one. 2 guys come to mind, Laramie Tunsil, Titus Howard, both questionable coming in. So that's a big one and a big storyline for Houston. We'll see if either one of those guys or both are able to go in this one. But Buffalo also missing some guys, already have some players ruled out. Khalil Shakir, the wide receiver for Buffalo, the top wide receiver right now for Buffalo on the season. You also have Taylor Rapp, the safety on defense, and Ed Oliver, the big nose tackle for Buffalo, all 3 of them going to be out for this one. So 3 big losses for Buffalo heading into this game. But on the other side, yeah, Houston's dealing with their own injury problems. Tank Dell is also questionable, most likely going to play. But I think maybe Mixon not playing as well as the offensive lineman being questionable, definitely a bit worrying right now if you are a Texans fan heading into this one. In the end, I'm going to take Houston on their home field. I understand that Buffalo has a lot to prove coming off of last week, and it is a tough loss to take on the road last week, getting trounced 35-10 and against a contender. But in that game, I think you saw what Baltimore was able to do on offense. And I think Houston's offense is also very powerful. They had 35 points, Baltimore did last week. And in a high total game, I'm expecting Houston to have points as well this week. I understand that the Bills offense is one of the best in the NFL, and they've shown up each and every week this season, except for last week, of course, against Baltimore. But I look at Houston's offense on the other hand, and although they're not fully healthy, missing a guy like Mixon, I still think CJ Stroud will have his top weapon in Nico Collins go off in this one. They can figure out ways without Mixon in the lineup to get that running game going. They haven't been able to do it too much just yet, but Ed Oliver not being in there at nose tackle will definitely help the chances of the Houston run game to get going in this one. In the end, I'm going to pick Houston, and it's based on the injuries to Buffalo. Khalil Shakir being out, I think, is bigger than people think, because when you look at this offense, yes, they have guys like Dalton Kincaid, Keon Coleman. However, I think Khalil Shakir being the top weapon for Josh Allen and always being right there for him, and they've gone to Khalil Shakir a lot recently. I think the Texans will be able to zone in on a guy like Keon Coleman, a guy like Dalton Kincaid. Although their secondary has not looked fantastic so far this year, Houston, I still think they can get to Josh Allen and get to this offense who's missing a couple key players overall in this game. And I think I'll take the Texans to win this one. I'm going to go with the over. I mean, it's a high total for a reason. Both these offenses are very strong. Both these defenses have not looked fantastic so far this year. Obviously, Buffalo in the first couple of games, Houston has not. But even after last week, I would say, plus the losses being out for this game, Buffalo definitely, their defense needs some work after last week. So when you look at it in the end, I'm going to take the over 47.5. And I would take the Texans to win this one on their home field. The next game we got to get to is the Dallas Cowboys taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. This one coming on Sunday Night Football. And two teams that haven't met on prime time in so long, I think in over 40 years or 30 years. These two teams finally meet again, and Cowboy and Steeler fans will be going at it on Sunday night. It's the 2-2 Cowboys taking on the 3-1 Steelers, taking place in Pittsburgh. Dallas sitting at second place in the NFC East coming into this one, with Washington leading the way at 3-1. They're tied with Philly at 2-2. In the AFC North, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers on top, sitting at 3-1. Baltimore right behind them at 2-2. I'm going to take the Steelers in this one, and rightfully so. They are 2.5-point favorites coming into this one, total sitting at 43.5. I just don't think Dallas has looked great this year. And yes, they got a win against the Giants last week. They got a win against Cleveland on the road in week 1. But Pittsburgh's a tough team. Their defense is really strong. They've looked really good so far this year. Alex Highsmith is out for this one. That's a big loss for Pittsburgh, but their defense is just a different animal to go up against. And I understand that people look at Dallas's offense versus the Steelers' offense, and they probably take Dallas in the end. But don't discount this offense with Justin Fields at the helm. They've looked very solid so far, and although the points have not come, they do enough on offense to win games, relying on their defense as well to shut things down on the other end. Pittsburgh coming off a loss as well. So their confidence is a little bit lower than it was sitting at 3-0. However, I do think that they come back. They bounce back against the Cowboys. They're at home. Dallas has not looked great so far this year, like I said. And I think the Steelers will take this one on their home field, probably by a touchdown. I think this game ends up being Steelers because of their defense. And I think they could get to Dak Prescott. The Cowboys offensive line has not looked good to start this year, and it's been a struggle to contain some of these defenses that they've gone up against. In the end, I'm going to take the Steelers at home on Sunday night to defeat the Cowboys, and it may be a time to freak out then if you're a Cowboy fan. Of course, they were 1-2 last week, got the win to move to 2-2. They may fall to 2-3, and Questions will have to be answered by Jerry Jones, and it's not going to be an easy season. It hasn't been already for the Dallas Cowboys, but I'm going to pick the Steelers to win on Sunday Night Football. Should be a good one. Tune into that one. Cowboys and Steelers, a battle of the old rivals taking place on Sunday night at 8:20 Eastern. But that'll do it for episode 6 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast. Please subscribe below. I've been Zach Malamud. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend. And talk to you all on Monday.